Please tell us about the origin of the Kushan Empire and the Gurjar-Pratihar Empire and the relationship between them. So the origin of these two empires, that's very interesting. Um, so these are two very different dynasties, empires. The Kushans, basically, the Kushans originated in the so-called present-day Xinjiang region, which is currently occupied illegally by China. Okay, so that was the, as far as we know, the homeland of the Kushan people, the Tarim River Basin, north of Ladakh, north of the Himalayas, right? So the Kushans were an Indo-European people by ethnicity and by language. If you look at their genetics, which is available in abundance, their genetic lineages, the most of them had the R1A1A lineage, which is identical to what most Indian males carry today. So essentially, they were one of these Mleccha clans that had migrated out of India, north of the Himalayas, several thousand years ago, and they set up their kingdom over there for a very long time. And eventually, about 2,000 years ago, they re-invaded India. Right? So it was not a foreign invasion of India. It was an invasion of India by a group or a clan or a people who had long ago migrated out of India. So they were basically coming full circle. And this is evidenced by the fact that there is not one single record of any ethnic or cultural or religious conflict between the Kushans and the Indian population. They simply assimilated harmoniously into Indian society, which tells you that they were culturally, linguistically, etc., ethnically very much the same as Indians, right? So, what is the origin of the Kushans? The first Kushan emperor or king that we know of is Kujula Kasa, who lived in the first century, about 2000 years before today. He was the great grandfather of the great emperor Kanishka, who is believed to have lived in the second century. I think his coronation is believed to be around 127 CE or thereabouts. The Kanishka the Great, one of India's greatest emperors. He was a Kushan, and the Kushan Empire lasted about 3.5 centuries. It came to an end approximately in the middle of the fourth century, right? And its successor state was the Great Gupta Empire, which had no relationship with the Kushans, or maybe it did, but we don't know if there was any significant relationship, right? So the Kushans, basically their empire came to an end, and the Kushan people just quietly assimilated into Indian society in northern and western India. So I would say that the majority of people in northern, western, central India would have some Kushan ancestry, but it doesn't mean that they are not Indian, because the Kushans were the descendants of Indians anyway. So that is about the origins of the Kushans. What about the Pratiharas? The Pratiharas became the origin of the Pratihar Empire is in the late 7th century. Their first king, the founder of the empire, was a king called Nagabhatta. Now, this guy, Nagabhatta, he was a feudatory, he was a vassal of the old Chavda dynasty in Rajasthan. So there were two branches of the ancient Chavda dynasty. One was centered in Bhinmal in Rajasthan, and the other one was in Gujarat. So the northern branch in Bhinmal was in power between the 6th and the 8th centuries, and one of their vassals was this king called Nagabhatta. After the northern branch of the Chavda dynasty declined and fell out of power, Nagabhatta became a king in his own right, and he was a king in the 8th century, right? So, and the great, so that is the origin of the Pratihar dynasty, the Pratihar Empire, and their greatest king was Mihir Bhoj, I think, who lived in the 9th century. And the this dynasty also came to an end in the 11th century when Mahmud Ghazni sacked and conquered Kannauj. The guy who was repeatedly pardoned by Indians who defeated him. That guy. So it's a lesson of history. We should never have pardoned and let that guy go and escape with his life. Anyhow, so I hope that gives you an idea of the origins of the Kushan Empire and the Gurjar Pratihar Empire.